Hello, everyone. My name is Rob de la Espriella, and I am passionate about solving problems. And for more than 3 decades, I've been solving complex problems at the nuclear power plants and the nuclear weapons complex. But I'm here today because I'm on a very specific mission. I'm out to change the way that the world solves complex problems, a very specific type of problem, those caused by the human interactions with the world around them. Now, I wanted to start my story by sharing with you this very cool picture of me sitting in front of a control room. This is the control reactor panel for the B reactor at Hanford. This is the world's first full-scale reactor in Hanford, Washington, designed and built in the early 40s as part of the Manhattan Project. And the photograph is very meaningful to me because this is the reactor that manufactured the plutonium that was used in the atom bombs that actually helped bring World War II to an early end. Now, I wanted to tell you one of the most interesting stories about the Manhattan Project because this plutonium saved the world from an oppressive regime. Think about how important this was, right? Well, this plutonium was transferred from Hanford after it was ready to Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico by train by one individual with a briefcase. Think about that. This is the 1940s. And this is how we treated the most important thing probably on the planet at that time. Now, let me circle back to problem solving. The atom bomb and the Manhattan Project is probably one of the best examples in the world of solving complex problems using math and physics and other sciences. But I wanted to talk to you about another kind of problem, problems that can't be solved by math, physics, and the sciences. Hey, but before I go on, let me tell you, anyone can go to the B reactor at Hanford and tour the facility and sit in that same chair that I did because now it's a national park. Let me take you to the 1980s for a different kind of problem. Do you remember where you were back in January 28th of 1986? That was the day that the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up on launch from Orlando's Kennedy Space Center. Now, I remember that day very well because I was in the reactor control room of a nuclear submarine, the USS Simon Bolivar. And when we heard that the Challenger blew up, we all went to the TV and we all got a sick feeling in our stomachs as we saw that replay over and over that day. How could this be possible? What allowed this to happen? We lost the entire crew of the Challenger that day, including the first ever teacher to go up in space. Her name was Christa McAuliffe, and she was a middle school teacher that taught civics, American history, English, and social studies. Christa beat out over 11,000 other applicants to fulfill her dream of becoming the first teacher in space. She was the first in President Ronald Reagan's Teacher in Space project to remind all Americans of the important role that teachers and education serve in their country. Sadly, there were millions of school children worldwide that were watching the live transmission of the Challenger launch on that cold January morning. Let me fast forward now 17 years to February 1st, 2003. On that day, another tragic incident. The Columbia Space Shuttle burned up on reentry. This time, it was because of a small crack on the leading edge of one of the wings. The crack had been caused by a small piece of foam that broke off of the booster rocket on takeoff and struck the wing. This was the 28th mission for the Columbia shuttle, and it turns out that in all previous 27 missions, small chunks of foam had broken off of the booster rockets and hit the shuttle on takeoff. Well, we lost another 7 brave astronauts that day. Years later, I had a chance to study these two incidents and found that there was a number of remarkable similarities. For example, both shuttles had design flaws that were known for years ahead of time, that there were communication breakdowns, and that there were disregarded warnings prior to each accident. Both investigations said that NASA's organizational culture and decision-making process had as much to do with the disasters as the failed O-rings on the Challenger and the foam strikes on the Columbia shuttle. It's important that we learn from these incidents and why NASA scientists and engineers were not able to prevent a second space shuttle incident. What I discovered is that deep-seated cultural problems fall into a different category that we don't know how to investigate very well. These are human-centered problems. And solving these kinds of problems requires a completely different set of skills and knowledge. Now, a few years ago, I got a call from my good friend Scott, who works at a large international consulting firm. His company had a contract with the US Army to destroy projectiles containing deadly sarin and mustard gases. At the 1997 Chemical Weapons Convention, the United States committed to the rest of the world that we would destroy 100% of our stockpile of these inhumane chemical weapons by December 23. And now they were behind schedule. Scott told me that his organization was in a big bind because his company's experts and their vendors could not figure out why 3 large motors kept failing. The motors were all larger than my car's V8 engine, and they had failed a total of 7 times in the past 11 months, costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in refurbishment costs and lost production time. Every time they installed a new motor, it would fail within hours, usually due to high vibration or a broken coupling or a misaligned shaft. And these motors were very crucial to their operation because they drove the air compressors that provided vital breathing air needed to work in the buildings containing sarin and mustard gas. The motors kept failing because the experts would find and fix what appeared to be the cause, declare victory, and rush to install a new motor. The Army, frustrated by 11 months of the same approach with the same results, had now directed the company to stop and seek help from the outside. And that's why Scott called me on a cold winter day. So I agreed to catch a flight to Bluegrass, Kentucky as soon as possible. Now, Bluegrass is a beautiful place. Loved it there. It's just an hour and a half east of Louisville, Kentucky, where they hold the annual Kentucky Derby. Now, I would have probably been a lot more excited had this been the summertime, but it was the middle of winter, and that was just a little too cold for this Floridian. Now, I'm not a motors expert, I'll tell you that, but I guided a small team through some advanced problem-solving techniques, and we were able to identify the causes of all the motor failures and then develop a comprehensive plan to correct those issues and then install the 8th motor. But where most traditional problem-solving efforts would stop, we went into a more in-depth analysis using a systems approach that evaluated not only the equipment failures, but the programs, processes, procedures, management control systems, and other areas that may have contributed to the repetitive failures. And using this systems approach, we identified deeper-seated causes that the organization was not aware of, and they could have caused even more events. They were also shocked that we completed the investigation and installed the 8th motor in just 10 working days. Well, did the motor work? Did it fail? Well, more on that later. But as I reflected on this Army investigation, it struck me once again that just like the NASA Space Shuttle investigations, their subject matter experts were not able to uncover the deepest-seated causes and prevent repeat events. Now, in thinking about it, I came up with 2 reasons why. The first is that simply throwing your smartest people at a problem is not necessarily going to help uncover the deepest-seated causes of the problem. Most organizations that are out to solve significant problems put together a large team of their best subject matter experts, but they rarely have someone with enough experience in the science of solving complex human-centered problems and in these modern socio-technical work environments that we live with today. So it's like hiring a team of experts to go out and do a forensic analysis of a problem, say at a banking institution, but you never hired a CPA for the team. Or let's say you have to go to trial for an automobile accident, and you gathered your team of experts on car performance and car tires and traffic patterns, but you forgot to bring a trial lawyer on the team. The reality is that there's very little focus in mainstream academia on graduating students that have the kind of skills that can solve human-centered problems, and we're not getting that type of experience on these problem-solving teams. Now, it took me a long time for me personally to find out the hard way that my mainstream education had not prepared me for the human-centered problems I was going to encounter most of my career. You see, I joined the Navy right after college, and they trained me for the most exciting and rewarding positions I've ever had, to be a nuclear shift supervisor on a reactor and to be an officer of the deck on a ballistic missile submarine. I still consider those the best jobs I've ever had. But when I arrived on my first submarine in 1985, I really quickly found out that my master's level education in nuclear engineering did not help me at all with any of the problems that we encountered in our day-to-day operations. There was this one particularly serious problem that I remember really well. We had a bad chemistry in our steam generators right after our chemical addition had been completed, and we almost had to shut down our nuclear reactor. Now, we didn't have any methods to systematically investigate this kind of problem. And if it wasn't that we had experienced Navy chiefs, we might not have ever figured out that it was a human error during the valve alignment for the chemical addition. And we had a chance to solve it and fix it right away. Now, another major reason why the experts could not solve the Army motor failures is that we need to change the way we solve modern problems. Now, Scott's organization, like NASA and many others across all industries, are still using traditional tools and techniques that were developed in another era, before the age of computers and many other technical advances. I'll give you these two examples. Two of the most popular problem-solving tools are the 5 whys and the fishbone. And those are from the 1930s and 40s, respectively. In the last 3 decades, I've taken at least 8 professional courses on root cause analysis and complex problem solving, and none of them use an integrated systems approach or consider the modern socio-technical work environments that make solving human-centered problems that much more difficult. So, how important are those two revelations? Well, the annual cost of our inability to solve recurring human-centered problems across all industries is incredibly high. Would you be surprised if I told you that the monies we waste each year because we can't stop recurring problems is in the trillions of dollars? Here's an example. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that the cost of fraud, waste, and abuse in our healthcare system averages nearly $1 trillion per year. In other studies conducted by the Consortium for Information and Software Quality over the last 3 years, found that the cost of poor quality software in just the United States is costing that industry over $2 trillion per year. So these motor failures at the Army base are just one of many, many examples of the kinds of recurring problems that are costing us time and money and resources across many industries. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, we installed that 8th motor on that second Friday that I was there, and it ran like a champ. Around 2015, I finally recognized that to solve human-centered problems takes an approach that simultaneously evaluates, number one, human behavioral factors and at-risk behaviors. Secondly, the human interface with the physical world around us. Things like the tools we use, the equipment that we interface with, the kinds of materials that we use on different things. And number three, the human interactions with our modern socio-technical work environments. And that includes a whole host of things. For example, the use of computer applications, the matrix organizations that we work in, the scores of processes and procedures that we work to, things like big data, metrics, performance indicators that drive performance. And last but not least, let's not forget to mention the ever-shifting cultural norms that we're expected to follow. By 2018, I started teaching others how to solve complex human-centric problems using this approach. And in the past few years, this modern approach to problem solving has actually been adopted at most of the US nuclear weapons complex and the national laboratories, as well as by major corporations such as Westinghouse. My team is also working with the Government Accountability Office to help them update their problem solving and assessment capabilities so that they can more effectively assess federal government agencies. But I think that solving human-centered problems is not just for these technical industries. It is my opinion that everyone should be taught how to solve human-centered problems right alongside the traditional STEM programs. Let's imagine for a moment how amazing our world would be if, in addition to being taught how to solve problems using math, physics, chemistry, and the other sciences, that we were also taught how to find the deepest seated causes of the behavioral factors that were causing at-risk behaviors, or the causes of why corporations are setting up structures and systems that cause people to fail, or how leaders are establishing the wrong cultures, resulting in problems. Not only those, but we could also put a big dent in a lot of our wicked problems, such as homelessness and hunger and racial prejudices and countless others. My unproven theory is that it is human-centered problems that are costing industries the majority of the trillions of dollars we're wasting each year. I think you'll all agree with me that the combined effects of solving these kinds of problems would save revenue and save lives, dramatically changing the world as we know it. I am on a mission to change the way the world solves problems. So I'd like to leave you with this challenge. If you want to make a real difference in your communities and at work or in our government, then we must learn how to solve the human-centered problems that are prevalent in our modern socio-technical work environments. I also want to ask that you join me in advancing the study of complex human-centered problems by helping spread this field of study to our academic institutions and school systems across the country. Together, we can prevent the kind of problems that cost us much pain and time and resources. And in the case of Christa McAuliffe, her fellow astronauts, and countless others, preventing the kind of problems that cost them their lives. Thank you. Have a great day.